For the year 2020, I am filming a video review for every new movie I see, whether in theaters or at home. And on January 18th, I watched The Lighthouse. Welcome to my year in movies. This is talking to myself. It's not obvious, those are M's. We're good. Oh gosh, so The Lighthouse is Robert Eggers' 2019 psychological horror film. You may remember the name Robert Eggers from the film The Witch, with the stylized W, so it looked like two V's. It had the goat. And The Lighthouse is another psychological horror film, kind of like The Witch, from what I understand. I've actually not seen The Witch. I don't know what I was expecting going in. I think I was expecting it to be weird, and it was weird. It was everything I wanted it to be as far as weird went, but then it was weird in different ways that I didn't expect. Whew, explaining this one's gonna be weird. So one thing I will say for the film that's really cool is it feels like an old school horror film. Due in part to the fact that the film is shot on, I believe it was 35 millimeter black and white film, which it may be black and white by default, I don't know. And the aspect ratio is tighter. It's more of a square than like the typical aspect ratio we're used to in theaters. And so that made it feel like the film is actually like 60 or 70 years old, which was super neat. I really enjoyed that. And even beyond that, the horror lies more in the visuals and just kind of how trippy it is. Like, it is brutal, but it's brutal without being gratuitous, and it's unflinching without being oppressive. For example, I'll be upfront, I'm going to spoil parts of this movie, but I am very confident that it will mean absolutely nothing. Like, I don't think me saying some of these plot points is going to actually spoil the film. So there's one scene where Robert Pattinson's character is just fed up with this gull, and he like ragdolls it to death. And it is horrifying, but it's not disturbing. And it didn't feel purposeless, and we'll get to that more in just a second. But speaking of Robert Pattinson, he and Willem Dafoe, I really hope they had a fun time filming this together and working together, because I want them to do more films together. They were absolute units. Like, this was an insane performance from the two of them. Their accents were weird but consistent, and it was one of those weird feelings where I knew fully well that I was watching Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. But then there would be moments where they would just phase into, you know, these crusty Newfoundland lighthouse keepers. Especially when Willem Dafoe would go on these long tirades and monologues, and they were just so beautifully scripted. The dialogue is so painstakingly crafted. And from what I understand, Robert Eggers and his brother like read journal after journal of lighthouse keepers, or they read, I'll put the name here, but there was a woman, I think it was a woman who had written like a book about lighthouse keepers, or had compiled all of these stories, and they read through those and used that to kind of recreate the dialogue. And it shows, like, it's a very well crafted dialogue. And the whole film is atmospheric, and every part of the film comes together to really craft a very precise feeling. The production and set design work together to create the mood and the tone, and the cinematography feels very old school too. Very slick stuff, and the costumes are absolutely fantastic. It all comes together just so beautifully, and it wastes no time in establishing that mood, which grips you for the entire runtime of the film. If I had to describe the film to someone else other than saying it's weird, I would like to call it Moby Dick meets The Shining meets The Birds, and even poke fun at that Moby Dick influence. And it is a weird film, but all of that weirdness feels like it matters. I think there are some movies that come out that they throw in all this weird, meaningless stuff, and you know, it's just there to mess with your mind. But this movie messes with your mind, and it feels intentional the whole time. Everything, every detail felt important. And when I got to the end of the movie, I was like, okay, I think I understand what happens, but I need to go back and watch it again. I also needed a second to just absorb it. It was so much to take in. But speaking of getting to the end of the film, The use of sound design and lighting and sound mixing, I think that's what was happening here. It just created this cacophonous, discordant, uncomfortable final image, and it was potent. Oh man, there are films that have endings that are supposed to just, kind of jerk the hood off of your face in the middle of the desert, and you're just supposed to wander your way back to civilization, and there's nothing there to think about. This one was so bizarre, but it made sense. That's nearly lost my notes, my bad. But like it got to the end, and I felt like I understood what happened. Now granted, I felt like I needed to go back and watch it again to really understand it, but I didn't leave the film upset. I left the film satisfied in a weird way. This film was good. On a production scale, Lighthouse is a 10 out of 10. It's bold, it's inventive, and it's an instant Halloween classic. I really think this is a new perfect film to show on Halloween, especially if you have friends who want to watch something different. If you have friends who don't like jump scares, if you have friends who aren't really into the horror scene, I think this is a really good film to kind of throw back to old school horror and just have a lot of fun with it. I don't speak from personal experience, but I feel like this is either the best film or the worst film to watch when high. On a personal enjoyment scale, it's probably a 7 out of 10, and not because I didn't like it, but because, again, there are just some moments that are weird, and it's not that I didn't enjoy them, but it's odd, and it's not the kind of film that I'm like, oh yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked watching it, but did I like it? 7 out of 10. For rewatchability, I give it another 7 out of 10. It isn't that I'll have to be in the right headspace to watch it. It's just a lot to take in at once. And I recognize it's a stunning film and I absolutely adore it, how off the wall it is and how bold it is in being off the wall. And I hope more films like this get made. I hope Robert Eggers continues to make really weird, uncomfortable films. It's a really cool experience for that reason. Overall, I'm giving The Lighthouse an 8 out of 10. I highly recommend it if you're looking for something artistically done or just straight up weird. I'm really disappointed Willem Dafoe didn't get anything for this. Either of them, really. They're great. Anyway, Lighthouse, super fun. This has been My Year in Movies. Thank you for watching.